Hello and greetings to all chess lovers. We've come here at this time. This is my YouTube channel. I wanted to talk about chess traps in more detail and actually give a more complete explanation about them, which wasn't possible on Instagram. I've also put my Instagram page down here. You can check it out for different traps, and that's why we've come here. On the YouTube channel, I can give much more complete explanations. If you have any questions, be sure to ask them in the comments and I'll answer you. I have carefully selected a few different openings for us to start with today. The first one is the Queen's Gambit declined. But by using a specific series of different moves, and let me mention something important as well. Basically, the definition of a chess trap is that your opponent makes a critical mistake and then you take full advantage of that mistake. But the mistake they make is one that a high percentage of people might fall into. In other words, the likelihood of this mistake happening is higher than usual, which makes it worth learning. So you can use it yourself in bullet and blitz games if you want. Or if not, maybe sometime later. If your opponent plays it and you can handle it, let's go and watch the first game. The Queen's Gambit declined, starting with a specific sequence of moves. It includes various options such as d4, d5, knight to f3, knight to f6, and the move pawn to e3. All these moves are very common. Here, black plays bishop to f5 and the move bishop to c4. c4. These are moves that are played so that afterwards black can play pawn to e6 and then develop the bishop. Because if black plays e6 too quickly, the bishop gets stuck in the corner and can't be developed, so black plays bg4. Here, white shouldn't play too predictably because usually white plays bishop e2 here to block the pin and quickly transitions into the castling phase. But we have an interesting move, c4. The opponent continues with their previous moves. They play h6, which both advances the pawn to allow the bishop to develop and also defends against ng5. Now here, you make really good use of a small weakness and place your queen on b3. What's the idea behind this? The idea is that earlier, when this dark squared bishop was still on c8, it used to provide defense against potential attacks on the b7 pawn. It wouldn't let you attack b7, but now that it's gone, we take advantage of this weakness. You place your queen on b3, threatening the b7 pawn. In these positions, it's very common for your opponent to respond. They might play b7 to b6, but you shouldn't capture on b7 because you'll fall into a trap. I don't want to go into that right now. I want to look at the case where your opponent doesn't know about this and quickly plays a 6 to avoid any danger. Here, the small mistake that happens is that I put my knight on f5, attacking the bishop and not letting them keep both bishops. Maybe they play bishop to f5, and now we can start some very interesting attacks. We capture the pawn on d5, they recapture with their pawn, and now there is a really, really interesting move. Queen to d7, defending against it. Here, white has a lot of options and good moves like castling or developing their pieces. But there is one move in this position that is truly crushing. The move is a 4. So what's the story here? We have 3 variations and we want to analyze them together. One variation is that if they capture e4 with the pawn, you take with the queen, check on f7, and that's it. It's checkmate. Yet another interesting variation is if they capture f4 with the knight. If they do, you can castle your king cleanly and get ready for some amazing attacks. For example, right now you're threatening the powerful move d5. You launch a strong double attack while their king hasn't castled yet. For instance, if the bishop comes to h6 to defend against d5, you play bishop takes h7. If they capture with the bishop, you again play queen takes d5 and you're in a much better position. The computer also confirms this, and I've included its analysis for you. Now let's go back and look at the previous variation. What happens if they capture with the bishop? If they capture with the bishop, here, the most critical and decisive move is to play the bishop to g5. Based on the engine's current analysis, white is ahead by about 3 or 4 pawns. Black can't really do much here. For example, if they try to play bishop to e7 to prepare for castling, you just capture their bishop. After they recapture with the bishop, you take their knight and gain a significant material advantage. And if they try anything else, for example, if he puts his bishop on f5 in an attempt to defend the knight on d7, you can just keep increasing your attacks. You can simply play your knight to the c3 square to add more pressure. Bring the bishop to d6, take on d5 with the knight, and overall white's pieces are extremely active, while black's are basically trapped as if they're in prison, always watching out so that another piece doesn't get captured. The position and dynamics are much better for white. I've also included the analysis for you. Let's go watch the next game. Let's move on to the next one. Let's see what can be done with white in the French opening. What options do we have? As you know, after 1, e4, e6, 2d, 4d5, the nc3 line is the most famous branch, and among all the variations in the French for white, it's the best and also the most played. Here, black can play the well-known knight f6, or take on d5 with the knight after e takes d5. Actually, capturing back specifically with the pawn is considered a bit better than with the knight, but black can also certainly opt to take back with the knight instead in this particular opening sequence. If black wants to play a bit more creatively here, they can go for the aggressive pawn thrust to c5, with the strategic idea of developing their bishop to a more active diagonal while gaining a valuable tempo. What does that mean? That means after you capture with the pawn, they respond by capturing with the bishop. In other words, at the same time, they weaken white's center pawn and also develop their bishop. Here, first take the pawn on d5 with the knight, and after they take with the queen, now bring the bishop to e3. What's the threat? The threat is to play c5, and when they capture with the bishop, they end up down an entire piece. If they capture with the queen, you take the queen. If they capture with the pawn, you take with the bishop and win a piece. So right here, they are forced to exchange pawns, and after they do that, you capture the pawn back with your knight. Now, what is going on here? The knight that just moved to the d4 square really wants to move to b5 and create a serious threat on the c7 square. You create a threat on c7, and black is afraid of this threat and tries to block it. Don't worry. Here you make the interesting move, bishop e2, tempting black to capture the g2 pawn. It might seem like the white king is becoming extremely vulnerable, but if the queen is tempted to take on g2, now you play bishop f3 and close it off. The queen returns home to g6, you place your queen on d2 and get ready for a long castle. Here, the correct move is the pawn to e5, which is played to both forcefully drive back the knight and open the way. In fact, it opens up his bishop for attacking as well as the rest of his pieces. In fact, the pawn in the center is attractive so that his pieces can become more active. It's a tough and heavy move, but it's not the right one. After the move, e5 is played. Regardless of whether they decide on capturing the knight, we will go for the long castle. You are essentially choosing to sacrifice your piece in exchange for black's very unsafe king and black's completely inactive pieces, especially with the pawn that you capture with the bishop on that square. And now, I will take the opportunity to show you the full analysis board for a deeper look. Here, white has about a 3-point advantage, and black really doesn't have good prospects for continuing. Their pieces haven't all come out, and their king is in the center. For example, if they play knight c6, you play bishop f7 check, and in a way, the game is almost over. If king d8, it is queen e8 mate, winning 8 pawns. If they try bishop e7 to castle, play rook d1, then rook h1 or e1, depending on their file, to keep the advantage. In fact, you threaten the bishop, and there are a lot of other threats in the position, and white is completely dominant. Now let's proceed to the next trap, in the Sicilian opening. Let's take a look. With white, which is also possible. Your opponents might make the wrong move because this trap is quite hidden, so there is a real chance they will make this mistake. Black plays c5, white responds with knight f3, and black goes d6. White plays d4, black takes, white takes back, then black plays knight f6, attacking the e4 pawn, and you play knight c3 to defend. Here, it's very common for black to play g6 and develop the bishop with a fianchetto on g7. Here you can play the interesting move f4, threatening e5. If your opponent is the type who likes to castle quickly and doesn't have much time to analyze, here they'll fianchetto the bishop to g7. In many games, this move is played to control the e5 square. After they fianchetto the bishop to g7, now you push e5, and if they capture with the pawn, you recapture with your pawn. Now, in this situation, the most accurate move is to retreat your bishop back to the d7 square, which is better, but it is actually quite difficult for most players to spot. Why? Because by retreating the bishop to d7, you not only prevent black from developing their bishop, but it's also not really a sacrifice. By retreating, they actually bring more pieces into the center against us. This common hidden mistake can happen quite often, especially since the white king isn't exactly safe either. At first glance, the move g4 looks very tempting, but it is completely wrong. Instead, we give a check with the bishop on b5. Now here we have several different lines to analyze together to see what the potential outcome is. For example, if the opponent moves their knight to the c6 square, you capture the knight on c6. If they recapture with the pawn, you take on c6 with the bishop, and in the end, you win the rook. On the other side, we're also threatening to capture the knight on g4. Let's go back. Here, for example, if the knight goes to the d square, very easily, right at the start, the queen takes on g4, and the black knight is actually captured. That's why in this situation, the best, or maybe with little time, black might think that with h8 they can defend against this position. But the decisive move from before finishes the job. I've also put the notation for you down here. You can take a look at the next continuation with white. In the Scandinavian opening, which is played quite often, let's see how you can play against it in a slightly different and more interesting way. e4, d5. Take the pawn, queen recaptures, then develop your knight to c3. The queen comes to a 5. These are the usual moves. Here, play the knight move, bishop to d2. g4 is also very common. The knight moves, and the bishop plays bg4 to actually pin the knight. The fundamental idea is that I really want to play the move e6, so the bishop can come out, and then I'll develop my knight over here. But when you play e6, this bishop gets stuck here on the c8 square. That's why first the bishop goes to g4 to develop the bishop. And then it wants to play e6. Here it's very calm, and you can quietly play h3 to challenge it. Friends, what happens then? If the black bishop feels that it doesn't have much of a chance to retreat and might get attacked again and come under some pressure, here, if the bishop takes on f3, it's not a bad move, and up to this point, it's okay. You capture with the queen. The immediate threat is taking the pawn on h3. In fast-paced bullet games, your opponent quickly makes a decision, and the faster the decision, the better it is for you. And it's even better if they play e6, develop their pieces, and open up the way for castling long for themselves, just by defending the pawn on b7. But Overlock's move is a mistake, a very obvious mistake. I'll show you the analysis. There's about a 2-point advantage. Actually, here white can very simply, attractively, and happily put the bishop on b5 and attack the pawn. In fact, after knight to c6 and the queen comes to e6 with the move knight to d5. It is time to play the final farewell song for the black pieces. If the queen captures the bishop, there is a knight fork available and the queen is captured off the board. If, for example, black tries to play queen a5 to defend the position, here you can simply play b4, and wherever the queen goes, there's no escape, and white is completely winning in this position. Now it's time to introduce a very interesting line for black as well, so you can use it. It's a very common line, but you're going to play a bit differently and surprise your opponent. e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop goes to c4, you place your knight on f6. Here, you allow your opponent to play their knight to the g5 square, directly threatening the f7 square with a dangerous double attack. At this point, you play your bishop to c5, ignoring the pawn capture. If they take the pawn, immediately capture the bishop on f2. In fast games, your opponent really has to play quickly and doesn't have time to think. That is, if they haven't seen this trap, they might make the mistake of capturing the bishop with the king. The correct move is king to f1, making white's position better. But if they play king to f2, you capture on e4 with the knight, and now the position is equal. So how is it equal? White has two ways in this position to keep the game equal. One way is to play king to g1, which seems cramped, and honestly, it doesn't look appealing at all. In fast games, the opponent will likely err and won't play this move. It's very rare for this to happen in a game. If they've seen this position, they might play it right, but if not, they'll likely miss the correct move here. Another option is king to e3, where the king moves into the center, and we've always said that these kinds of moves are mistakes. So the two squares e3 and g1 make the game equal, and for the rest of the squares, if the white king goes there, we consider it a loss for white. For example, if the king goes to the square where the queen is, you play qh4 check. If the king goes to e2, you play qe4 check. If the king goes to f2, then d3. From c5, you give check. If the king goes to c3, do you play queen c3? You give queen h4 check and capture the piece. Next variation. If instead of moving the king to the e1 square, the king goes to d2 with the bishop already on d2, you can then give a queen h4 check and the king comes out. Actually, on the e3 square, now you can put your queen on e4 and you will have all sorts of dangerous threats to deal with. For the white king, it's really an unsafe position. It's a bad situation, and the chances of this mistake happening are very high, so you can take advantage of it. Thank you so much for staying with me. These are just 5 new traps that I haven't shared anywhere else. I haven't mentioned them in any package or on Instagram. Stay tuned for more traps. Stick with me. My upcoming videos will cover everything about chess from A to Z for those who want to learn chess from the basics, and also for those who want to learn about traps or get some middle game analysis. And if you have any tips, topics, or anything else, be sure to let me know in the comments. I'd be happy to chat with you. Have a great time.